Right, excellent. Good afternoon. I formally declare open this council meeting of the Colac Otway Shire Council on the 24th of August 2022. Almighty God, we seek your blessing and guidance in our deliberations on behalf of the people of the Colac Otway Shire. Enable this council's decisions to be those that contribute to the true welfare and betterment of our community. I would like to start this afternoon by acknowledging the traditional custodians and lawmakers of this land, their elders past and present, and welcome any descendants here today. I would like to advise that this council meeting will be recorded and live streamed with the exception of confidential matters. This includes the public participation sections of meetings. The live stream recording of this afternoon's meeting will be available on the website as soon as practical. By participating in open council meetings, individuals consent to the use and disclosure of the information they share at the meeting, including any personal and/or sensitive information. Please note that it is an offence to make an unauthorised recording of the meeting. Okay, apologies and leave of absence. I have received a request for a leave of absence from Councillor Joe McCracken. Councillor McCracken, do you wish to make a brief statement?
Thanks, Mayor. As you can see, I'm requesting leave of absence for those dates outlined up there. Reason being is because I'm now a candidate in the state election. Just to allay some concerns that might be raised, I will also be giving back my councillor devices so that I don't have access to any information that the Shire might have. The reason being is because the Shire obviously needs to do what it needs to do to advocate for certain positions with different political parties, and I feel that stepping away from that might allow the council to do that without any perceived influence that I might be able to have. So that's why I'm doing that.
Okay, councillors, do we have a mover to grant Councillor Joe McCracken a leave of absence from Thursday the 1st of September 2022? Oh, actually from Monday the 5th of September 2022 until Monday the 5th of December 2022 inclusive. Councillor Hart, to mover. Councillor Costin as the seconder. All those in favour? Joe doesn't vote though, does he? No. Oh no. Okay, the item's carried 6-0. Thank you. Okay, now we move on to question time. Colac Otway Shire encourages community input, and integral to this is the opportunity provided to ask questions at council meetings. A maximum of 30 minutes is allowed for question time. Community members wishing to ask questions of council by video conference were requested to register their intention to do so before 5 p.m. on Monday the 22nd of August 2022. No requests were received. I've received a number of questions in writing from Mr James Judd, Nasser Cobb, Jan Radcliffe and Tim Cobb. Questions received will be read out and a response will be provided by the relevant member of the Executive Management Team. Responses will also be provided in writing following the meeting. Okay, question 1 from Mr James Judd. Is the Colac Otway Shire Council going to have checked out the proposal to have a young people's advisory group, since it is proposed that all members would be paid $30 per hour through Headspace, when at this rate it could mean many people too young to enter the legal full-time workforce would be in receipt of money per year that is above the maximum allowable before any claim for a dependent would have to be reduced when a parent or guardian lodged their annual tax returns. Also, this carries the major risk that young people could be forced out of home, as they are a major liability financially for any to provide housing for them, as a tax deduction for expenses would be reduced or eliminated in total. Also, would people still at school or doing full-time study be able to be covered by family or other Medicare cover? Plus, who is going to make sure accurate records are kept for taxation purposes and the needed details sent to the Taxation Department as required every year? Plus, at the proposed rate per hour, it would be possible to claim in excess of any councillor's allowance and allowable claims per year for any one member of this young people's group. Response from General Manager, Community and Economy.
Through you, Mayor. Councillors working with Headspace Colac via our Colossal Youth Advisory Group to help Headspace carry out important consultations to inform youth mental health support services in our community. Headspace, which is a Commonwealth Government initiative, has an established practice across Australia of remunerating young people who participate in youth advisory roles. Council is not involved in administering any payments.
Thank you. Has the Colac Otway Shire Council done anything to make sure all its online facilities will be secure from the 1st of September 2022 when changes come in on registration of names used for online communications? Response from General Manager, Corporate Services.
Through you, Mayor. Council's IT team have taken action to secure the new .au direct domain that matches existing domains in use by Colac Otway Shire by applying to reserve the .au direct variant as part of the allocation process through the .au DA, Domain Administration Organisation, who is the administrator of Australia's top-level domains. The application process for applying for the new .au domain ends at 9:59 a.m. on the 21st of September this year. This application process is then open to the public on 4 October 2022. Council's current name and domain will not be impacted.
Thank you. Question 3. Of the areas considered in the Colac 2050 Growth Plan area, what certainty exists this area will be within the Colac area mail delivery zone, or in some of this area going to remain outside with less frequent mail delivery times? Mail delivery times can be very vital to people's health. Response from General Manager, Community and Economy.
Through you, Mayor. As residential development occurs in Colac and Limonite over time, it is anticipated that Australia Post will adjust its service delivery in response to this growth.
Thank you. Question 4. Since the Colac Otway Shire Council sells period membership to use certain facilities at Bluewater in Colac and collects the money in advance of the period starting, as payment has been accepted, you can't legally refuse to provide the service you have received money to provide unless you grant compensation for refusing to provide a service you undertook to provide during a specific period. You're not able to just extend the period of membership for any who took out membership for a specific period, as that was the only period some could use the facility, or to dead people who cannot use them. We have a very big danger in the 2022-23 financial year that due to works to be carried out at the Bluewater complex in Colac, many periods, some facilities will not be able to be used by those who take out period membership and pay for it. Response from General Manager, Community and Economy.
Through you, Mayor. It is acknowledged that this is a statement rather than a question. However, it is worth noting that Council continues to consider and review fees charged to Bluewater Leisure Centre members and takes into consideration any potential closure of services. It's also acknowledged that the Bluewater service is a vital and important service to our community, and we would certainly try to ensure that any closures are kept to a minimum.
Of all the funds proposed to be spent on the Deans Creek Corridor residential development area in the next few years, what portion of this amount has been allocated to investigate all shopping, medical facilities, transport requirements, schooling and community needs in this entire region? You cannot put off considering these needs until after developed and built up, or Colac is just going to be like Melbourne with ad hoc extension of services over many decades. Response from General Manager, Community and Economy.
Through you, Mayor. Funds set aside for the Deans Creek Growth Corridor planning will investigate the associated future demand for transport, stormwater drainage, retail, recreation and other community facilities, and ensure that the planning responds to these forecast needs in an appropriate manner.
Thank you. We'll move on to questions from Mr Nasser Cobb Forrest. Question 1. In April 2022, the Council replied to a question to the Council meeting. Council's commitment to reducing greenhouse emissions is demonstrated by the more than 65% reduction in its own direct corporate emissions over the last 10 years. So it is not carbon neutral 100% yet, as previously claimed. When would the Council envisage that it can reach carbon neutrality, and what are the actual actions it plans to achieve such outcome? Response from Chief Executive Officer.
Through the Mayor, thanks to Mr Cobb for his question and his interest in Council's achievement of carbon neutrality. I can confirm that in addition to the significant carbon emissions reduction over the last 10 years, the Council has achieved neutrality for the financial year of 2020-21 through purchasing some offsets for residual emissions, and that's a fantastic achievement. That commitment is ongoing. Council has made sure that its financial budget this year and into the future will have some capacity for those offsets. We're in the process of verifying emissions for the 2021-22 financial year. There is always a lag because we need to finish that end of year before we can calculate those emissions. We will then achieve carbon neutrality for the last financial year through again purchasing offsets. Council is also recognising that it's highly desirable to continue to find opportunities to reduce the emissions that we generate and thus reduce also the reliance on purchased offsets. But nonetheless, we're very comfortable to let our community know with confidence that carbon neutrality has been achieved. Thank you.
Thank you. Question 2. In November 2021, the Council indicated that councillors are confident that there is sufficient staffing in number and expertise in the Environment and Sustainability Department to complete the Climate Change Action Plan by June 2022. Considering it is already August 2022, when would the Council be able to produce the Climate Change Action Plan? Response from CEO.
And again, through the Mayor, thanks Mr Cobb. On a similar theme, we're excited in your interest in our environment strategy work. As you would be aware, Council has been very active in this space over last months, undertaking significant community and stakeholder engagement, and I hope that everyone has taken opportunity to participate in that. The preparation of the draft environment strategy will be ready before the end of the year for Council to consider, and as part of the development of that strategy, we're already identifying some things that will also be expected to be included in an action plan that will put that strategy actually into realisation, which is important. Those actions will include opportunities to combat, mitigate the impacts of climate change. That work is very clearly a high priority for our council and our community. It's well underway, but it is important that we make sure that we take the time to consider the community views as we shape that work, which we expect to be concluded at the end of the year. Thank you.
Question 3. Has the Council received the required EPA approval for the wastewater treatment conceptual design for the Forest Caravan Park site? Response from General Manager, Infrastructure and Operations.
Through you, Mayor, Council has not received the required EPA approval for the wastewater treatment conceptual design for the Forest Caravan Park site. Further information was requested by the EPA on the 29th of July 2022, with Council providing the information as required. Council is currently waiting on the assessment of the application by the EPA.
Thank you. Question 4. In July 2022, the Council responded, as per the updated governance rules, 27th April 2022, on the Shire website, Division 11. This updated rule keeps the Council opaquely operating. Would the Council consider keeping the responses to questions submitted to Council meetings posted on the website as part of meeting public records, repealing this updated rule as it keeps the community sentiments from being widely transparently visible? Response from Manager, Governance and Communications.
Through you, Mayor. Thank you for the question, Mr Cobb. Under Council's current governance rules, the minutes must record a brief summary of any public questions and responses provided by the Chief Executive Officer or their nominee. Council may choose to update its governance rules at any time. Questions submitted in writing and not responded to at the Council meeting do not form part of the formally constituted meeting and should not be included in the minutes or as a standalone document loaded onto Council's website.
Thank you. Moving on to questions from Dr Jan Radcliffe, Forest. Question 1. In a previous Council meeting, 29th of June, I pointed out the increased range of EVs over hybrid EVs, which makes them suitable for a lot of the Council travel and superior to hybrids in reducing emissions, and asked whether the Council would commit to buying EVs rather than hybrids when they become available. In reply, I was told about all the hybrid EVs which Council has bought without answering my question. So I would like to ask again, will the Council commit to buying EVs rather than hybrids as soon as they are available for its local travel and travel to Melbourne? Response from General Manager, Infrastructure and Operations.
Through you, Mayor, Council has moved to replace diesel and petrol vehicles to hybrid EVs as they are due for changeover. We now have 12 hybrids in our vehicle fleet, with 7 purchased in the past 12 months. Council has made no commitment to replace its fleet with EVs, but will continue to review our vehicle fleet, and the use of EVs will advance and evolve with the implementation and provision of more charging stations in the Shire and across the state.
Thank you. Question 2. In that same meeting, I asked about providing charging infrastructure and was told that Council was assisting private entities in installing fast EV charging infrastructure in Apollo Bay and Colac in public car parks. I have heard that this process has been going on for 2 years and that a private provider has become so discouraged by Council delays in improving public car parks that he has become discouraged and withdrawn his private funding. Is this true, and if so, why has the process of approving car parks for EV charging taken so long? Response from General Manager Corporate Services.
Through you, Mayor. Council received a request from a private entity to enter into a licence that would allow private electric vehicle charging stations to be established in the Pascoe Street car park, Apollo Bay. Council had forwarded a draft licence for their review and consideration. However, since then, the applicant advised Council they do not wish to proceed with the request. As such, the matter is now closed.
Okay, questions from Mr Tim Cobb, Skeens Creek. Question 1. What is the average residential rate bill in Apollo Bay for 2022-23, excluding the weekly waste collection fee, and how much has it increased, decreased since 2021? I'll read out the next 3 questions because the response is actually the same at this point. And question 2, what is the average residential rate bill in Colac Illuminite for 2022-23, excluding the weekly waste collection fee, and how much has it increased, decreased since 21-22? And question 3, what is the average residential rate bill in Colac and surrounds for 2022-23, excluding the weekly waste collection fee, and how much has it increased, decreased since 21-22? Response from General Manager Corporate Services.
Through you, Mayor. We're not able to do that type of analysis and provide a response at this time. A response will be prepared and provided in writing to Mr Cobb in the next 2 weeks.
Thank you. Question 4. The public toilet strategy identifies a number of high priorities where condition is poor and facilities do not meet requirements, including lack of DDA compliance. Memorial Square toilets are identified as standard plus service level in fair condition and not a priority. Will Council therefore prioritise the needs identified in this strategy, or will Council reject the strategy and prioritise Memorial Square toilets instead? Response from General Manager, Community and Economy.
Through you, Mayor. The public toilet strategy is being presented to today's Council meeting, and therefore it is not appropriate to comment on Council's consideration of the strategy. The Memorial Square toilets have been classified as visitor amenities, regional and local, due to their importance to both the local community and visitors to the region. The priority of facility improvements is not just based on the existing condition of the facilities. It also considers other criteria such as typology, location, level of use, accessibility, community benefit, and importantly, safety. Council has previously resolved to fund the redevelopment of the Memorial Square toilets through its local roads and community infrastructure allocation, with detailed design work to commence in the short term. Importantly, the new amenities will include Colac Otway Shire's first Changing Places facility, which is a high priority recommendation in the strategy.
All right, excellent. Thank you. As an end of written questions. Now we can move on to questions from the floor. Can I have a show of hands for anyone that would like to ask a question? So I've got questions from Mr. Beale. If you'd just like to make your way up to the microphone. It's Mr. Beale from Cororook.
The button. Thank you, Doug. I've got a property in Connor Street. It was an old hospital building. It was converted into accommodation for 5 people back in 1936. I purchased the property in about 2007. The property has, I understand, got one title, and I am rated with 5 rates for that one property because it has 5 occupants that live separately to each other. I would like to know what ruling or act or legislation it is that allows the Colac Otway Shire to give me 5 rates notices for the one property. And the reason I am asking this is because the Barwon Water get their information also from the Colac Otway Shire when they bill me for my water rates. And now the property is serviced by 2 water meters, one that serviced the garden and one that serviced the building, and I am billed for 5 service charges to the property, so 5 separate rates from Barwon Water as well.
Okay, thank you very much for your question, Mr. Beale. I think it'll be a question we'll need to take on notice and get our rates department to get in contact with you. Thank you.
Sorry, Mayor. So the question was, what act is it that allows that to happen? That's what I need to know.
We'll confirm that and get in contact with you. Thank you. Any further questions? Mr. Arundel.
Simon Arundel, Bungadore. I was disappointed to read in the Colac Herald, May, August the 15th, that this Shire is going to send $26,000 overseas to some foreign country, we don't tell us who, so they can, I guess, plant trees so you can all claim how climate clean you are. I don't understand the council. Why are they spending money outside of the Shire, which they complain about so often? Why don't we spend the $26,000 here? And if you don't get this special tick, I'll lend you a borrow and I'll tick your paperwork 6 or 7 times. Why are you taking this money out of Australia? Why don't you spend it locally?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Arundel. I might ask Mr. McNeil to respond.
Through you, Mayor, thanks for the question. Council's allocated $26,000 in the budget for the purchase of carbon offset credits to maintain Council's carbon neutrality, and Council's decision in the July Council meeting was to purchase accredited carbon offsets, and we need to be able to afford to buy those offsets within the budget that's been allocated. And Council accepted in its resolution that that would include consideration of international offsets. No decision's yet been made on what those offsets are. It won't necessarily be the planting of trees. There's a whole range of different projects that would contribute to potential carbon offsets that we might purchase.
Why spend it overseas? Do it here. Now, I put to this council, and about the last meeting I went to before lovely COVID came along, that why don't you bring in a policy of eliminating points of contact? Door knobs being replaced with levers, which you've got here. Why is it that we use a toilet, we wash our hands, and then we've got to open a door? These toilets are typical of that. Why isn't there an L-shaped bit of wall opposite the male and the female toilets? And there wouldn't need to be any toilets to get doors to go through to get in and out of those toilets. The same at Baker's Delight. I'm sure you women love walking through the streamers at Baker's Delight. Why are they allowed? All they're doing is spreading germs. There's other ways of keeping flies out of shops. There are many ways where we could lead a cleaner life, and then perhaps we wouldn't have to pay so much in carbon offsets, wasting money treating people. So why haven't you pushed along with this idea of eliminating points of contact? And at that meeting, I suggested you send a quarto page to every shire in the country advertising Colac's COVID cleanliness plan. Now we've got monkeypox. So why don't we work on a simple thing like that?
Okay, thank you, Mr.
Why haven't you
Arundel.
done anything?
I think we did listen to you and we have implemented some things, so I might ask Mr. McNeil to respond. Or, because I know we've done some of the things and some, or Ian, Mr. Surin.
Through you, Mayor. Look, yeah, I'll attempt to respond to the question. Yeah, look, again, a really good question. I think just as an example, the public toilet strategy that's being presented to Council today absolutely includes consideration of what you raised previously, Mr Arundel. As an example, we've made some changes to the Copac public toilets in terms of automatic water sensors. Unfortunately, to change things like doors to be non-touch does take a lot of work and a lot of resources, and it's not easily able to be done on many buildings, but they are things that we are certainly looking at, particularly when we're upgrading facilities. So I think it's a really good point that you've raised.
Could I make a suggestion? These 4 people sit over there in future and then we'll be able to see who's talking. Can't always tell who's talking.
Thank you for your suggestion. Thanks for your suggestion, Mr Arundel. It's a real juggle now because we're also trying to sort of rearrange things slightly also for the people at home watching. So it's a bit of a juggle, like what works best for the gallery, what works for our online audience as well. But we'll take that on notice because I can see that you're sort of hidden behind the officers. So thank you very much for your comment. Are there any further questions from the gallery? No. All right, thank you very much. Thanks for your questions. Okay. I'll note we've received nil petitions and joint letters. Are there any declarations of interest, please? Councillor Costin.
Thank you, Mayor. It's very recently been suggested, late today in fact, that I may have a conflict of interest in relation to, what item number is it? Item 9.3, the planning permit application, consideration of the planning panel report. I haven't had time to consider this. I don't think I do have a conflict of interest, but to be on the safe side, I'll declare a general conflict of interest until the matter is clarified.
Thank you, Councillor Costin. Okay, now I propose that we move to confirm the minutes from the council meeting held on the 27th of July 2022. Councillor Hart.
Thanks, Mayor. I want to move that we defer consideration of these minutes until the September meeting. The reason for that relates to the accuracy of the recording of some of the answers to public questions, but the motion is simply that we defer consideration of the minutes of the council meeting held on 27th of July until the September meeting. And if that's seconded, I'll speak to it, of course.
Okay, is there a seconder? Councillor Costin, is that to be opposed? No. Councillor Hart is the mover.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. My area of concern relates to the summaries of the questions recorded in the draft minutes. And these are the questions where you've read them out at the council meeting, so they're answer to written questions. And this particular month, I've compared the actual answers that were given at the meeting with the summaries. And to give a couple of examples, and I don't propose to go through of all of them, there's one to do with the forest wastewater and what steps council had done in relation to issues arising on some properties, and part of that answer was completely omitted and, in my view, changed the substance of the answer. There was another one in relation to the heat pump at Bluewater that had 2 different parts, one related to the reasons why the council didn't go ahead with the heat pumps, another one related to the disclosure of a report. The reason as to why we didn't go ahead with the heat pumps was completely omitted from the draft minutes, whereas the other part was included. There are other examples, and I've scrutinised this perhaps more thoroughly than I have in the past because the public have raised issues in relation to past meetings where the summaries have omitted significant parts of the context or the substance of the answer that was given. So I think we should reconsider this. I also note that I've got a notice of motion to deal with this issue later in the meeting, but I'm afraid, having gone through that process of comparing the summaries with the actual answers that you gave at the meeting on the day, I don't think that the minutes are accurate in that regard. The information that's removed has not reflected the context and the full substance of the answers given, in my view.
Thank you. Councillor Costin is the seconder.
Thanks, Mayor. I'll defer until I hear other councillor views.
No one opposed.
I have nothing to say. Thank you.
So you don't want to say anything? Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor McCracken.
Look, I'll just say if this does not succeed for whatever reason, I'm happy to move the minutes as they are.
Thank you. Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? All those against? The item's carried 5-2. Okay, now we move to, where are we going? Sorry. Now we move to item 9.1, the first officer report, Domestic Wastewater Management Plan for adoption. The purpose of this report is to present the 2021 Domestic Wastewater Management Plan to Council for adoption. Do councillors have any questions of officers? Councillor Hart.
Thanks, Mayor. My question relates to the very high classification in the sensitivity rating in the report. Am I right to understand that the very high classification could mean that some properties will not be able to be developed for a house with a wastewater system because there may not be a system that is of reasonable cost that would be able to meet the requirements in terms of wastewater disposal?
Through you, Mayor. The very high classification in the DWMP document does indicate that those properties have very high constraints to be able to treat and retain wastewater on the properties. That classification comes about because of a range of different factors that include rainfall, soil types, the size of the property, and so on. It doesn't give any definitive answer as to whether a property can be developed or not. It really just is a guide to property owners and to council officers to indicate the level of information that would be required to be provided by someone when looking to develop land. So someone that's rated a lower constraint needs to provide less information and less complex information. Those that are rated very high have to provide a much more comprehensive land capability assessment to support a development. And council officers would then assess that proposal, having regard to those site-specific factors in the land capability assessment and the design of the house, including the size of the house and any proposed recycling of water and the way in which water is managed on the property.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? No. Okay, councillors, the officers have provided a recommendation with the report for our consideration. Does any councillor wish to move a motion in relation to this matter? Councillor Costin is the mover. Is there a seconder? Councillor Potter, is it to be opposed? Councillor Costin is the mover.
My opposition is to move an amendment, Mayor, just so you're clear.
Oh, sorry, I actually missed it. Did you put your hand up as opposition or you opposed?
Technically I did, but it's to move an amendment.
Oh, okay, sorry, I did not see it up on the screen. Thank you. Councillor Costin.
Thank you, Mayor. I enjoyed reading all 300 and something pages of this report. It's lots of data, lots of maps, graphs. It was good reading. I've supervised the preparation of a lot of reports like this, and I can say, apart from a few discrepancies in the numbers, it's an excellent report. It's soundly based, and the practical application of the risk assessment framework is great to see. So thank you. Well done to James and to Whitehead and Associates for this. I'd also like to highlight the extensive public consultation that's been undertaken through media releases, online information, frequently asked questions, media advertising, 3 drop-in sessions and the public exhibition period. The fact that there's been no objections during this exhibition period attests to the listening skills and responsiveness of those who've prepared the report. We have a critically important role to protect the state's declared water supply catchments and an equally essential role to prevent wastewater pollution and odour nuisances in our small unsewered towns. This plan provides clear strategic directions and guidelines that we need to manage on-site wastewater systems and to meet the requirements of the updated EPA, Environment Protection Act and its regulations. It's also pleasing to see that the plan proposes standard operating procedures that align with the EPA toolkit and apply a risk-based approach that should reduce the officer time, the officer workload, from 5 days per week down to 1 day per week. Bowen Water and Council investigating options for reticulated sewage in forest. These date back to discussions before 2017, if not earlier. So it's great to see that this plan acknowledges and supports this as a priority action. So I'm very pleased to move the motion to adopt this plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Potter.
Thanks, Mayor. Yes, just like to support what Councillor Costin said, although I didn't get the same enjoyment that he did out of reading it. I certainly did out of parts and the important bits, but some of the technicalities took me a little while to get through. But it's a great report, and it was put out for community consultation, as is Council's practice, and there was no submissions. So it attests to the quality of the report, or the fact that the community trust councillors to get the job done.
Thank you. Councillor Hart.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I move an amendment, and the amendment is to add a point 4 that will read that Council resolves that this strategy is to be provided to the Shire valuers so they may consider the relevance to the valuation of properties, if any, particularly those in the very high sensitivity category.
Can you just read that again and just a bit slowly?
Okay, so that council is already there. So the amendment is to add point 4, and point 4 would read, this strategy is to be provided to the Shire valuers so they may consider the relevance to the valuation of properties, if any, particularly those in the very high sensitivity rating.
Just the end bit? Read the end bit again.
Oh, I'm happy for some tweaks if someone wants to tweak it, but the end bit was particularly those properties in the very high, so very high, in inverted commas, if you like, sensitivity rating. So it would be, you don't need the of. The first provides could be resolves, that council resolves that this strategy is to be provided to the Shire valuers, which you've got, so that they may consider the relevance to the valuation of properties, comma, if any, comma, particularly those in the very high, with inverted commas, sensitivity rating.
Councillor McCracken just has a question.
Just ask this, probably more of the CEO than anyone else. If this number 4 was, what does that mean in terms of workload for you guys?
If council resolves that the strategy is to be provided, we'll put a cover letter on the strategy and send it to the valuers. It depends on what the valuers' questions then are, and we'll have to respond to those, but I can't anticipate at this time what they will be.
Okay. So Councillor Hart is the mover of this amendment. Is there a seconder for this amendment? You can't second it. No. If there's no seconder, then this amendment lapses. And Councillor Hart, it's back to you as the opposer.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. It's very important that we have appropriate policies to deal with wastewater disposal. We don't want to be polluting the environment. And for that reason, I will be supporting the resolution. But I think it's very disappointing when councillors don't consider the full result of their decision, such as the decision we're taking today. The reason you didn't get submissions from the people in the very high category, I put it to you, is that they won't know they're in that category until the day that they apply to build a house and find that they're told you can't build a house because the system, the wastewater system that you need either doesn't exist for your small lot in that area, or it will be so costly that it makes the capacity to build a house as not a real option. So that's the first thing. Please don't use as an excuse there were no submissions. There were no submissions because some of the people who are most harshly affected by this policy probably won't know it until they come to try to build a house on their vacant land. Now, what I've raised over many years, and I think it's disappointing that councillors as representatives of the community don't also raise, is that we have a rates department that relies on valuations that are provided on the best possible use. The best possible use being the assumption that a person can build a house. We now have a report that lists 185 properties across the Shire with very high risk in terms of wastewater sensitivity, and there's a question elsewhere in the report. Some of these properties may not be able to build a house, they may not be able to have a system that meets the requirements. So I think that it would have been quite a reasonable thing to do for council to send this report to the valuer so they're informed of that. I think it's very unfair to the community when you have the rates department sending people hefty rate bills based on the fact that they can build a house on their vacant land, while at the other side of the table, somewhere else in the same council, it's well known that the likelihood to be able to build a house is very low. We've had this with small lots in the farm zones, where on one hand, the planning department says you can't build there. On the other hand, rates department levy rates bills based on the capacity to build a house. And this is another such factor. It's a similar situation. You've got 185 properties, very high risk. I would have thought that bringing this report to the valuer's attention so that they can take into account those limitations when valuing those properties would be an entirely reasonable thing to do. And I think councillors need to start to consider what is their responsibility to represent the community. It's our responsibility in part is to be vigilant to these sorts of issues, to be vigilant and to collectively instruct the management through a resolution such as this to simply send the report to the valuer. No doubt this will become an issue as people over time realise the significance of this report, and those 185 property owners, some of them will find they're not able to build a house because of limitations. And I'm not suggesting we allow people to pollute the environment. Please don't someone say that. But at least let them assert the proper property value that reflects those limitations and not conceal this report from the valuer. And that's what we're effectively doing. The valuer is not going to know about this report unless someone brings it to their attention.
Any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Costin, you have a right of reply.
Thanks, Mayor. Councillor Hart makes some very good points here. It is important that the valuation that we use for our determination of rates does reflect the use of the property or the potential use of the property. He's highlighted that there is a non-alignment between our rates department and our planning department, and I hope we can overcome that and address that sometime in the future. I would also hope that even though the amendment's been rejected, that we do make our valuers aware of this report. It is an important report in relation to the determination of the value of the property. Of course, anyone who receives their rate bill and is concerned about it does have the opportunity to appeal on the basis of this report also. Sorry? Thank you, Mayor. So apart from that, and I know some might be daunted by the technical basis of the report that I enjoyed, based on my experience and my reading of the document, I've got no hesitation in asking councillors to adopt this plan. Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item's carried 7-0. Thank you. Now we move to item 9.2, consideration of the public toilet strategy. The purpose of this report is to present the public toilet strategy for adoption following the public consultation period. Do councillors have any questions of officers? Councillor Costin.
Back in 2019 or 2020, I'm not sure, or might have even been earlier, the Great Ocean Road Task Force highlighted the inefficiencies of fragmented management of our public toilet assets and other services along the Great Ocean Road. It particularly cited an example of a council operating and maintaining public toilets right beside public toilets that were operated and maintained by the foreshore manager. Of course, it was referencing the public toilets we operated.
Councillor Costin, have you got a question for officers?
Yes. Of course, referencing the public toilets we operate at the Visitor Information Centre. Does this strategy or the action plan in this strategy propose any actions to reduce these inefficiencies, perhaps even a joint cleaning contract with Gore Kappa, for example?
Through you, Mayor. So the toilet strategy did consider all the public facilities across the Shire, which I think there's around about 89. In terms of recommendations, it's more specific to council-owned and managed facilities. But in saying that, certainly we're keen to work with other authorities, including the Great Ocean Road Coast and Parks Authority, in terms of the provision of public amenities along the coast. This strategy provides really clear direction, I believe, for council-owned facilities. In terms of your question around cleaning, the strategy doesn't get down to that level of detail, but again, that is something that, along with a range of other services, we'd be having discussions with other entities about.
Councillor Potter.
I just wanted to flag that I have an alternative to move, Mayor.
All right, are there any other questions? No. Councillor Potter, you flagged, you had a motion? Oh.
Yes, I thought Councillor Costin was going to flag one, but I do have one that I flagged, Mayor, so... yeah, sorry. And that's it up on the screen, Mayor.
So adding 0.5. So it's the recommendation with that 0.5 added?
Yes, it is, Mayor, thanks.
Okay. Councillor Hart, you have a question?
Yeah. Thanks, Mayor. Yes, I do have a question. My question relates to the point 5 around the material difference. And through you, Mayor, Councillor Potter, is it your intention if there's a material difference for, say, one particular town, that would be enough to bring it to the attention of council if this motion got through? Or do you mean a material difference for the whole strategy, in which case you might just say, oh, well, that major change for one town doesn't really affect the whole strategy?
Councillor Hart, no, it is my intention that this can relate to material difference in relation to one town. And I have in mind a couple of different locations, but I think it's reasonable that given the concern and the submissions in relation to the strategy, that we should be able to consider one location rather than just leave it to a broader strategy.
Thank you.
Thank you. So Councillor Potter is the mover. Is there a seconder? Councillor McCracken, is it to be opposed? Councillor Costin, Councillor Potter is the mover.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Happy to move this, and I think point 5 makes a good point in relation to future of the strategy, bearing in mind that Gorkappa have not finished. I'm not sure if they've started their strategy in relation to public toilet amenities along the coast, and certainly we have to be mindful of their strategy, and when they're considering their strategy, they'll be able to look at ours if this is adopted. I understand that there was concern about we should wait until Gorkappa have done their strategy, but I think it's prudent to get on with the job in relation to this issue. I think 2018 there was a notice of motion brought to bring a toilet strategy. On the back of a comment I think that you made in discussion, Councillor Hanson, and it's a strategy this Shire hasn't had before, so I think it's a very, very important and relevant strategy, and officers need to be able to get stuck into applying some of this strategy across the Shire as soon as they can. I'm referring to, in the short term, certainly the Memorial Square toilets and the very, very poor facilities out at the Irrawullaby Rec Reserve, or the footy ground out there. Really need some work done out there, and I note recently Council approved some funding to be contributed towards a study of the facilities out of Irrawullaby, and I think putting off this strategy potentially holds that work up, as it may do hold up other work in other areas across the Shire. I'd like to thank the submitters for some quality submissions, especially those from the forest community, Lavers Hill, and other areas on the coast. I think some of the items brought up in the submissions are operational rather than strategic, but I know some of these things, especially around signage and wayfinding, have been raised before, and I encourage officers to deal with those issues as soon as they can as well. It's a lengthy strategy. Councillors have the right to review it down the track. Certainly should be reviewed once Gorkappa finish theirs, whenever that's going to be, and we can make changes and improvements as we go along. But as a group, we have seen this at least a couple of times before today. We put out for consultation some quality submissions from the community, which I've mentioned, and I think councillors, I encourage you to support this so we can start implementing some of the strategies mentioned.
Thank you. Councillor McCracken.
I'll reserve, thanks.
Councillor Costin, you opposed?
Thank you, Mayor. Look, as much as I enjoyed reading the Wastewater Management Plan, I didn't enjoy reading this strategy one bit, and I read it a number of times. It's unfortunate because it got off to a reasonably good start with the background review report that we only recently received. I think we got that yesterday. The background report includes a vision that council will provide high quality public toilets for residents, workers and visitors. It recognised the importance of the visitor economy and said the focus of the strategy will be public toilets owned and managed both by council and other public land authorities, looked at through a tourism lens that considers the high volume of visitors to our shire relative to the population. This draft strategy responds to a notice of motion put up by Councillor Potter in 2018, so it's been a long time coming. If we just go through what the notice of motion asked for, it asked for a condition assessment, and all we've got is one or two words on each public toilet, whether it's well maintained, fair or poor. There's no other condition assessment provided. It asked us, the notice of motion asked to assess current and future demand. This is not covered by the strategy. It asked to consider locations and placements, and this only receives a cursory coverage. It asked for innovative design, technology and environmental issues to be addressed. Again, very cursory coverage. I expected to see a lot more. In terms of uniform design standards, approaches to reduce the transmission of disease and design opportunities to minimise future costs. The notice of motion also asked for the examination of cost recovery measures, and we got a quarter of a page on this. And this doesn't even make it to the action plan, so we're not proposing to look further at cost recovery, however that may be. We were to look at public toilet requirements on public land, and that's land not owned or managed by council. It doesn't really address that. And it asks for basic information for budgeting purposes, and this action plan doesn't include any information for budget purposes. I expected at least to see estimates of future costs and opportunities and some sort of examination of how to reduce future life cycle costs. Instead, we've got a draft strategy that takes something that should be relatively simple and makes it more complicated. It imposes a bureaucratic decision-making framework that seems to be aimed at reducing the number of council-managed public toilets or reducing the service to our community rather than addressing future community needs. The proposed action plan is mostly data collection. It says consider this, investigate that, review something, consult, assess, support, promote this, or even
Councillor.
woe betide, it proposes to set up a process, another process. This strategy sits under our council plan objective to make Colac Otway Shire a destination to visit. Under the objectives, there's an indicator that we will implement 60% of the actions proposed in the strategy by 2025.
Councillor.
But even if
Thank
we
you.
implement 90% of the proposed actions, we'll have done little to make any material difference to make Colac Otway Shire a better place to visit.
Thank you, Councillor. Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Hart.
Thanks, Mayor. I think when this report was requested in 2018, I thought it was intended to respond or develop some sort of plan for the inadequate public toilet facilities throughout the Shire, particularly in the coastal area. Since then, the COVID-19 pandemic has happened, of course, and in the short or medium term, there's been a reduction in the visitation, particularly from international tourists. And I'm a bit concerned that this strategy hasn't really allowed for the fact that the usage, the visitation in this Shire post-COVID does not necessarily reflect what is normal and what was the case back in 2018, 2019, before the COVID-19 pandemic. I'm also concerned how this report does seem to have become a report into how we might have fewer facilities, or it's called consolidation. There's been references to whether or not the Pascoe Street toilet which is needed, whether or not there needs to be 2 different public toilet blocks in Lavers Hill. Well, I can tell you pre-COVID, there used to be queues of people with the different buses that were going through Lavers Hill for the public toilets. And I won't give the colourful description that I shared with councillors in briefing about what you find under white tissue paper along the Great Ocean Road. But my advice to you, if you find white tissue paper along the Great Ocean Road, I don't pick it up. I do pick up other rubbish, but not white tissue paper. So I think some of the concerns and the disappointments that Councillor Costin has expressed are entirely valid. I don't know how this report got so far off track. The comment put in by point 5 by Councillor Potter is certainly an improvement to the resolution. The Great Ocean Road Coast and Parks Authority has only come into being, I think, since probably after the resolution that was moved in 2018. I'm inclined not to support this resolution, although I do acknowledge the safeguard that Councillor Potter has put in with point 5 will make this a one of these resolutions that is at least not as bad as it was when it was how it read in the agenda. But I just can't understand how a suggestion to improve in toilet facilities, which was the motivation for all this, gets so far turned around when we finally have a final report 4 years later.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor McCracken, you have a right of reply. You reserved, sorry.
Yeah, I did. Look, I don't take such a pessimistic view of this, to be honest. I think it's fantastic that we have a toilet strategy here. And I want to acknowledge Councillor Potter too for the work that he's done on this, because it was 2018 when he requested, and it has been a long time coming, hasn't it? Quite a long time indeed for this. And it's here and we've got it. And yes, it may not be 100% perfect and every little detail might not be as we want it, but it's a great starting point. And there's certainly a lot of things in here that I do support. So if you have a look through the report, some of the strategic recommendations in design, prioritise the safety of users ahead of any other decision-making considerations for public toilets. I mean, that certainly makes sense. Provide all gender toilets for future council facilities. I mean, these are sort of some of the things that, do you want to really push them down the track? Do you want to say no to this sort of stuff? And say, well, the situation's not so great at the moment, but, we haven't got 100% of what we got, so we're going to settle for nothing. I mean, that just doesn't make sense. We know that the Great Ocean Road Authority has a process that they're yet to get underway with about looking at their provision of toilet facilities as well. And from what I understand, they actually might use this strategy as a basis to form their own. And it provides an opportunity for us to collaborate with them in a productive way so that we might be able to do some sort of negotiations to better facilitate outcomes along the Great Ocean Road. But honestly, there are other facilities in the Shire aside from the coast, and facilities like the Memorial Square toilets have already been mentioned, but there's a whole lot of the Shire that also relies on this strategy to get outcomes as well. It's not just a coastal toilet Shire strategy. So we need to keep that in mind as well. And I note that in this, and I note from officers' comments before, that there's nothing stopping us from amending this strategy in the future if it is so desired. So why wouldn't you support this? Why wouldn't you?
Thank you. Councillor Potter, you have a right of reply.
Thanks, Mayor. Look, I think Councillor Hart makes a valid point in relation to perhaps usage and numbers. And I'd caution anybody who may or may not do a head count of the use of toilets along the coast, in Murray Street, even in Beac and Cressy, that the numbers today are going to be the same numbers in 12 months' time, because as tourists return, the frequency and usage of our toilets are going to increase. May never get back to what it was in 2017, 2018, but it will increase, and we need it to increase for that economic activity. So we have to be mindful of that. And I think this strategy gives us that flexibility to cater for all that increased usage, or to look at that and develop facilities in accordance with that increased usage. It talks to this will talk to the long-term financial plan, because we need to be mindful of expenditure in our future budgets. And in the meantime, though, it does allow officers to get on with the work in relation to improving facilities.
Thank you, councillors. I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? All those against? The item's carried 5-2. Now we move to item 9.3, combined amendment C111 COLA and planning permit application PP 219-2020, consideration of planning panel report. The purpose of this report is to present council with the panel report in relation to submissions received to the combined amendment and planning permit application for the Red Rock Region Theatre and Art Gallery expansion proposal. I note that a revised panel report has been issued following distribution of the agenda papers, and I table this report. Oh, Councillor Costin, sorry.
Thanks, Mayor. Look, it's been very recently suggested that I have a conflict of interest, a general conflict of interest in this matter. I only became aware of that suggestion early this afternoon. I don't think I do have a conflict of interest, but to be on the safe side, I'll declare a general conflict of interest and until the matter is clarified. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Costin. We'll wait for you to leave the chamber. Thank you. Thank you. Do councillors have any questions of officers? Councillor Hart.
Thanks, Mayor. I've got two questions. I might give them both to you if you like. The first one is, does any objector to this have a right of appeal to VCAT? Normally, if there was a planning permit, and this is a planning amendment and planning permit at once, you might have a right of appeal to VCAT. So that's the first question. The second question, or the second issue, relates to the requirement for screening and how that will be done in such a way that it's consistent with the requirement from the CFA to have a defendable space. I'm happy to expand on the question, but basically it's certain vegetation might not be consistent with the requirements for a defendable space. So how will that be resolved if this is approved? Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. To the first part of that question, there isn't any appeal right for submitters to VCAT on the merits of the decision by council. So with a combined planning scheme amendment and planning permit application, it's a different process to that of a normal planning permit application by itself, where after a council decision there is a right of appeal to VCAT by either the applicant or the submitters. With the combined amendment process, once council adopts an amendment and forwards it to the minister then approves the amendment and the amendment's gazetted, and the minister instructs the council to then issue the permit. There's no further appeal right. There's only appeal rights to VCAT if they're made on a procedural basis. In other words, if there's been some mistake in the process that would lead there to be an issue with the decision that's been made. The second part of the question about screening is that there is conditions on the proposed planning permit that require some screen vegetation to be provided. There is a balance that needs to be met in the design of that landscaping that meets the bushfire protection provisions, defendable space that's required to meet the CFA conditions, as well as providing some visual screening of the development. We accept, and the panel accepted in their decision in the consideration of this, that there wouldn't be a complete screen of the proposed buildings and the use on the site. there would need to be consideration of the degree of spacing between canopy trees and achieving a level of a type of landscaping that achieves the two objectives. So there's further information that would need to be submitted on that aspect before they're approved and the development can proceed.
Are there any further questions, Councillor White?
Just a quick one about area and trying to get my head around. I know there's been some contention about the inaccuracy of the areas reported to the panel, and it's been clarified. But if you could just describe to me what that sort of area actually looks like and how big it is, please.
Through you, Mayor. Certainly during the panel process, there was through one of the submissions, it was identified that the area of land to be rezoned was inaccurately marked on the plans that had been exhibited, and that's since been updated and is represented as being 4,907 square metres, and that's a very marginal difference to the previous figure that was quoted of say 20 square metres.
Are there any further questions? No. Councillors, the officers have provided a recommendation with a report for our consideration. Does any councillor wish to move a motion in relation to this matter? Councillor Potter, you move the recommendation?
Sorry, Mayor. Yes, I'll move the recommendation, Mayor.
Yep. Is there a seconder? Councillor Bell, is it to be opposed? Councillor Potter is the mover.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, this original application has been to us and then to a planning panel, and now we have the recommendation from the panel with some adjustments to what was originally proposed. I note that an objector's representative has pointed out to the panel some inconsistencies in what was presented and what was said on occasions, and that's resulted in a revised recommendation from the panel. And I take those things on board that the objector's representative pointed out and alerted everyone to those mistakes or inconsistencies, but there was nothing in those that caused me any real concerns, other than that's been tidied up now. And I know the objector's representative's gone to a lot of work, as has the officers and as the panel, to consider this matter and work through those minor issues. I hope if this is adopted and the applicant pursues his intentions with this, that the concerns of the objectors are ill-founded, or sorry, not ill-founded, but the mitigation strategies as part of this permit keeps them satisfied, and that the proponent and the objectors can mend their relationship and work together and look at the mutual benefit to the local and broader community if these plans do come to fruition the way they're presented.
Councillor Bell is the seconder.
Thanks, Mayor. I think Councillor Potter's outlined the process really well, outlined some of the challenges along the way, and I certainly agree with his comments. I've got nothing further to add.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Hart.
Thanks, Mayor. As Councillor Potter's mentioned, this has gone to an independent planning panel. I would like to note that the recommended planning permit that would be granting it or sending to the Minister for approval if we approve this resolution has over 40 conditions and several notes attached to that. I wish the applicant well if this is approved, but I also note Council's ongoing obligations regarding those various conditions some of which have actually been modified as a result of the panel hearing. We also note that this panel report raises interesting issues, perhaps about a greater flexibility in the farm zone than has been suggested by Council in the past, and also raises issues about the rural living strategy not being a hard and fast rule in terms of other planning decisions. So I think whilst I appreciate and respect the contribution made by the objectors on this matter, there are significant conditions, and Council will have an ongoing responsibility for ensuring those conditions are adhered to, and some of the comments in the panel report, in my view, could be relevant in terms of how the farm zone is interpreted in other planning matters before Colac Otway Shire.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? I just might note that it was stated by Councillor Potter that due to some inaccuracies there was a revised recommendation. It wasn't a revised recommendation, it was just an updated report, not a revised recommendation. I just wanted to correct that or clear that up. So councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item's carried 6-0. We might just have a 5-minute break, councillors. We'll come back at, we'll come back at 5:25. All right, thank you. Okay, councillors, councillors are all here. We might get going again. We will get going again. Now we move to item 9.4, the Asset Management Policy for adoption. The purpose of this report is to present the Asset Management Policy for adoption. Do councillors have any questions of officers? No? If there's no questions, Councillor Costin.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to propose an amendment, an additional point to go into the policy if I could. I think I've sent that through.
What's that? I need to move a motion. You're moving a motion with the fourth point?
To amend the officer recommendation, thank you.
Okay, is there a mover for the motion? Councillor Costin is flagging that he has an amendment.
I mean,
Mayor.
Look, I'm happy to move it, and it can be second and all that sort of thing. But my interpretation of what Councillor Costin was saying is that he would just move a motion with that fourth point included. But look, if you want to do it that way, I'm happy to do it
he
like
did
this.
suggest he wanted to move an amendment.
I know, but I think it was just a matter of wording. And look, I agree, but I think if I can reinterpret what you were saying, Councillor Costin, I think you might have meant to say a motion with that fourth point included. Is that correct? Or would you prefer it?
I'm not sure. I think if I move the motion, I can't amend it. Is that right?
Okay, well, I'll move it then.
Okay, Councillor McCracken's going to move. Is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Potter, is it to be opposed?
Sorry, Mayor. I did have a question and I've been trying to wave my hand at you.
Oh, you're frozen on the screen, that's why. Sorry.
Oh, am I? Okay, I'll move around a bit more. Am I still frozen to you?
Yes, you are frozen. So, ask your question.
Okay, that's a bit of a worry. My question was relating to the comment on page 513 about decommissioning assets. Is that does that mean that Shire halls could be closed down as a result of us supporting this policy? And what comfort can the community have and councillors have that supporting the policy doesn't result in moves to close down Shire halls, for example?
Through you, Mayor. So there is a policy around acquisition and disposal of assets, and our community engagement policy as well that would outline what we would do to consult with the community.
Do you have a further question? You are still frozen. I'll let you know when you're not. So you'll have to speak up if you have a question.
Okay, not on this one. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. All right, so we have Councillor McCracken has moved the motion on the screen. Councillor Potter is the seconder. Councillor Costin has flagged that he wishes to move an amendment. Do you want to put that amendment up on the screen, or let us know what that amendment is?
I'd like to add an additional point. I'd like to move the additional point, point 4, as on the screen. Thank you.
Okay. You've got a question, Councillor McCracken?
Yeah, my question's about that fourth point. Yeah, I can't move or second that amendment. But so my question is, what operational impact is that going to have for officers?
Councillor Hart, just while we're answering this question, can I just ask you possibly to log out and log back in again, because you are frozen and that might help.
I was going to suggest that, so you don't want me to wait till this item's finished? I'm happy to do it.
Through the Mayor, Councillor Hart, because a vote must be by a show of hands, you're frozen. We won't be able to see your hand if you put it up, and therefore you won't be able to vote. So that's why we're suggesting we
I'll
pause.
leave and try to come straight back. Thank you.
Okay, I've forgotten the question.
No, that's all right. The question was, if this was included in the motion, is it going to have a material impact on day-to-day operational, or what would it likely be from your point of view, CEO?
I'm not sure what what Councillor Costin's expectation is, so I'm not sure.
Okay, well, I'll ask it of Councillor Costin then. What is your expectation?
Thanks, Councillor McCracken. The expectation is that when we're preparing the annual budget, that rather than just plug in the ongoing costs from our asset management plan, that we actually look at our assets and see whether there are opportunities to reduce the future costs. Going forward. And I expect that as things change, as time goes on, there's technological advances, there's new materials, there's new ways of doing things, and we should be constantly looking for those opportunities to reduce our future costs.
Okay, does that answer your question?
Sort of. So you want there to be an annual review. Is that because it says shall be reviewed on an annual basis? Is that, I'm just trying to understand what it looks like, that's all.
That's fair enough. Thanks, Councillor McCracken. The way I'd see it happening is that there are officers responsible for each of our assets, whether they be public open spaces or whether they be public toilets or whatever. When they propose future budgets or propose costs for our annual budget, rather than just plug in what's happened in previous years or what the expenditure is in previous years and add a percentage increase, that they actually look for cost savings. So it's an individual officer time, and I expect it to be minimal time involved because they should be aware of changing operating procedures or materials or cheaper ways of doing things all throughout the year.
I just might ask the CEO to make a comment.
My question is, I guess, is it your assumption that that doesn't happen already?
Wouldn't get into debate here, I guess.
No, it's not my assumption that it doesn't happen at this time, but it's not spelled out in the asset management policy that it needs to be done. So it's not spelled out in the asset management policy. It may not happen.
CEO,
I'm happy to maybe help to clarify what does happen. So, because it's more for me a matter of how we budget rather than the asset management policy, Councillor Costin. So we don't budget our expenses, for example, around maintaining assets just based on previous years and adding an increment. What we do is we actively look at what the actual cost has been in the prior year. We try and drive efficiencies in an ongoing manner, and then we would then come to the preparation of next year's budget, for example, and say, well, if we've been able to deliver this asset maintenance or service delivery at a lower cost, we would lock that lower cost into the future budget. And we would undertake our reviews more, so every year as we budget, we don't just take an old number and factor it up or down. We look at that certainly for expenses, contractors, labour, material, etc. We look at what is really the budget amount that we believe we need, incorporating any efficiencies we have been able to identify in the year. In terms of a more comprehensive review of assets, we would do that more on a periodic basis, sort of rotating through. It might be we do a deep dive into an asset class. 1 year we lock in some savings, and the next year we might look at a different asset class. And we might be then implementing some actions. So it's more of a, rather than every single asset every single year, we sort of try and drive a deeper dive and greater efficiencies in what, as I said, on a rotating basis. If that's expected to be done every year, then that will be a different approach.
Okay. We do have to just vote on this amendment in a minute with Councillor.
Yeah, I was just going to ask a question to help me work this out, of the officers around. I would have thought that is built into the budget build policy and the way you actually develop the budget, and that then would not really be necessary in terms of this particular policy, that the way you approach the annual budget build would cover what is Councillor Costin's looking for in there. So I'm not sure that it's necessary.
Okay. For starters, is there a seconder for this amendment? No. Well, the amendment's lapsed, which then leaves us with the, what do we have, the mover? Yes, back to the mover. Councillor McCracken? No. Councillor Potter is the seconder? No. Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Hart.
Thanks, Mayor. Pleased to see that you can see me. The only comment I'd make, obviously these are important policies. I do get nervous with some of these policies when it comes to community facilities, but I take the point and the comments that were made that this of itself doesn't lead to any particular facility being decommissioned. I think if that is ever considered, the community and councillors need to be involved in that process and involved in the process from the beginning, not the end. So that's the only comment I'll make, but I do take a degree of comfort from the answer that was given by the GM earlier, and for that reason I'll be prepared to support the resolution moved by Councillor McCracken.
Thank you. Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item's carried 7-0. Okay. Now we move to item 9.5, nomination of a substitute representative for Municipal Association of Victoria Special State Council meeting. The purpose of this report is to request Council appoint a substitute representative to attend the MAV special meeting at the State Council to be held on Friday the 16th of September 2022. Given this item refers to the delegate report, item 10.2, I invite Councillor Hart to touch on any key points.
Thanks, Mayor. I'm happy to, in due course, I'm happy to move the resolution you have before you, but I'm happy to answer any questions if anyone wanted to ask any questions, particularly of the delegate report, which is at, I think it's 10.2.
Are there any questions from councillors? No? Okay, then we'll say, Councillor Hart, you are moving the motion that's on the screen. And Councillor McCracken is the seconder. Is it to be opposed? No. Councillor Hart is the mover.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I do want to speak a little bit on this. I won't be available to attend the meeting on the 16th of September. That meeting will be dealing with the new rules. I did have some concerns with how the meeting in June was conducted in relation to the discussion on the rules, and I've put that in my report at 10.2. There were some issues that Council had in relation to, if you want to have a resolution with the MAV, it has to go through a Council meeting first. That may restrict the time to lodge that, because you've got the Council meeting process and then various lead times before you can lodge, in order to lodge a resolution for the MAV. And I think the process we had where the Mayor and CEO could agree that there was to be a particular resolution to go to the MAV was quite efficient and useful. There are also some issues raised at the meeting in June about the new rules to do with voting for the board. What will happen is the municipal councils will have input to 5 board members, whereas there will be a different voting system for rural councils. Will only vote on 1 member of the board, and so there'll be 5 different regions rurally. And I think those issues could have been teased out and discussed had the MAV meeting been conducted in a more consensus-based way in June. Where this leads us now, I think the delegate should be free on the day, as I'm sure Councillor White will be. If someone else suggests that the rules be deferred to allow a proper discussion, I think that one option would be for Councillor White to support such a resolution. I'm not suggesting that Councillor White goes in there and tries to change the whole process, but I would just think that we as a council should be open to Councillor White considering any alternative proposals to be put, keeping in mind the view certainly that I have in relation to the June meeting and other councillors I might point out. Essentially, you had to vote down one proposal before you could even discuss an alternative. Whereas if there should have been an open discussion on the various alternatives. It was conducted in a very autocratic way. So I'm good luck, Councillor White, if you're appointed to this role, but I think as a council we should be accepting that Councillor White has the option of supporting alternatives to defer consideration of the rules, or support the rules, or not support the rules, because there's certainly arguments for and against in the way the situation is now. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor McCracken. Is the seconder? No. Does any other councillor wish to speak? No. Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item's carried 7-0. Now we move to item 9.6, Audit and Risk Committee Minutes, 25th of May 2022. The purpose of this report is to provide for information the Colac Otway Shire Audit and Risk Committee Minutes dated the 25th of May 2022. Do councillors have any questions of officers? No. Okay, councillors, the officers have provided a recommendation with the report for our consideration. Does any councillor wish to move a motion in relation to this matter? Councillor White is the mover. Is there a seconder? Councillor Costin. Is it to be opposed? No. Councillor White is the mover.
Just very briefly to say it was a very long and complex meeting in some ways, but really well managed and well handled, and some really good debate about a number of things. Covered things like compliance and environment and infrastructure, lots of different areas. And I think there was particularly some good debate around the risk matrix and getting some clarification around that and opening it up for some further discussion into the future. But yeah, it was a really good meeting and I'm happy to move that.
Thank you. Councillor Costin, is the seconder? No. Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item's carried 7-0. Okay, now we move to item 9.7, authorisation of an officer under the Planning and Environment Act 1987. The purpose of this report is for council to appoint Jason Scammell, Local Laws Ranger, as an authorised officer under section 147(4) of the Planning and Environment Act 1987. Do councillors have any questions of officers? Councillor McCracken's prepared to move the motion. If there's no questions, is there a seconder? Councillor Costin, is it to be opposed? No. Councillor McCracken is the mover. No. Okay, does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item's carried 7-0. Now we move to item 9.8, report of informal meetings of councillors. Please note that the purpose of this item is to report the informal meetings of councillors and does not require a council decision. Now we move to delegate reports. Item 10.1, report from delegate, the 2022 National General Assembly in Canberra, 19th of June to the 22nd of June 2022. Please note that the purpose of this item is for Councillor Potter to report to Council on the 2022 National General Assembly in Canberra and does not require a council decision. Councillor Potter, would you like to make a brief comment?
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I'm happy to table this report. Hope everyone's had a look at it. encourage perhaps a rotation of councillors to go to this Australia-wide conference in Canberra. I think it was worthwhile. Happy if anyone has questions.
Are there any questions? No? Okay, thank you, Councillor Potter. We have dealt with item 10.2 and we dealt with item 9.5. Okay. Now we move to notices of motion. Item 10.3 is a notice of motion regarding the Governance Rules Submissions Committee. The purpose of the report is to consider Councillor Hart's notice of motion regarding changes to the governance rules and a proposal for a submissions committee meeting to hear submissions. Councillor Hart, this is your notice of motion. So I think it's pretty self-explanatory. So we could just open up to questions of councillors if there's any questions. No, if there's no questions. So Councillor Hart, you're the mover. Is there a seconder? Councillor Costin, is it to be opposed? No. Councillor Hart as the mover.
Thanks, Mayor. The issue, what this relates to is the review of the governance rules, and when it was originally put to the last meeting, there was only going to be a submission period of 2 weeks to try to get the thing sorted out by this meeting. Councillor Potter, to his credit, suggested that we should have the 6-week consultation period, and I think, and I probably overlooked it a bit at the time, that should allow us time to have a submissions committee hearing. There's already one scheduled on the 21st of September in relation to the Lake Colac lease, and it would allow submitters to speak to their submission if they want to. I know the governance rules sound like a bit of a dry old topic, but when it comes to being able to have matters dealt with before council, or perhaps to ask questions and have answers recorded, they do have relevance to the community, and some people in the community may want to take up that option. So I just think option that they can speak at the submissions committee, noting that there'll already be a hearing on that date to do with the Lake Colac lease.
Councillor Costin is the seconder? No. Does any other councillor wish to speak? No. Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? All those, no one against. The item's carried 7-0. Now we move to item 10.4, notice of motion recording of responses to public questions in the meeting minutes. The purpose of the report is to consider Councillor Hart's notice of motion regarding public question time responses under the current governance rules and a proposal for a submissions committee meeting to hear the same. Councillor Hart, this is your notice of motion, and obviously you're the mover. I think it's self-explanatory again, unless there's questions from councillors. Are there any questions? No. Councillor Hart, the motion's up on the screen. Is there a seconder?
Yes.
Councillor Costin, is it to be opposed? Councillor Hart as the mover.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. What this relates to is where the mayor of the mayor of the day reads out answers to questions at council meetings, and council started to record summaries rather than the actual answers. My suggestion is that we should consider reinstating just recording the answers, and I'm only talking about those questions that you actually read out at the meeting. I'm not talking about every single question. So that would more accurately reflect what was actually given at the meeting. I know it's been said, oh, you can look at the video recording, but video recordings of meetings are only up on the internet for a year or so, and already some of the video recordings for our meetings back in around 2020, some of those have already been removed. So the minutes are the only record. This would actually save some time. The officers would simply have to go copy and paste from the sheet given to you to be put it in the minutes. And I have started to review some of the answers to questions after some people raise this issue with me, and I see the officers have, with the best of intentions, removed slabs of answers in some cases, and I touched on this in relation to the minutes earlier today, which in my view has changed the substance of the answer in that it didn't fully reflect the answer that was given. This process would actually save time. It's only for those questions that you read out, and it would also give a more accurate and permanent record, so we wouldn't require some officer to, with the best will in the world, to try to summarise an answer that has been given by someone else. One of the summaries in the minutes that we were considering earlier today was simply removing the word because and replacing it with the word therefore elsewhere. So it wasn't much of a summary. On the other hand, there are areas where big chunks of relevant information was excluded. So I think it's an open and transparent thing to do to restore the actual answers that are given.
Thank you. Councillor Costin.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm not sure why this came about, why we proposed to prepare summaries of the questions and answers. It seems a waste of officer time. There may be some reason, I'd be interested to know. But I'm reminded of a quote by Mark Twain, who said, once, I apologise for writing you a long letter because I don't have time to write a short one. So to prepare a summary takes up officer time. To just cut and paste will reduce the officer time involved. Thank you.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Potter.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, just briefly, Mayor, just want to remind us all that the discussion around our governance rules, which are our rules, has been difficult to get to this point. And through no fault of our own, there was timelines put on us by the state. I think staff have done an incredible job trying to make it easier for us and trying to accommodate councillors' views since we've initiated the discussions. So I understand why Councillor Hart's brought this. I will be supporting it, but this is not a reflection on any of the work that has been done so far, but merely just a result of some councillors' views that we need to incorporate. But again, I want to recognise the work staff's done through this whole process, including this particular section that we're talking about now.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor McCracken.
Thanks, Mayor. The governance rules, I appreciate all the intent behind this to get a transparent record, an accurate record of what's happened. I think the governance rules have been a bit like a boomerang for us. They just keep coming back when we try and tick and flick and get it out there. Look, Councillor Hart, you've probably got me at a weak moment. I might even support this today. But look, maybe it's not a bad thing I'm going on a leave of absence because I might not see the governance rules again. I think the community want us to focus on the big picture issues, and as much as this might be important for some people, I think there are a lot of other things that are important as well. So hopefully this is the last of it.
Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item's carried 7-0. Now we move to item 10.5, Notice of Motion Foot and Mouth Disease Advocacy for Action. The purpose of the report is to consider Councillor Potter's notice of motion acknowledging local farming concerns and advocating for increased preventative measures. Councillor Potter, this is your notice of motion, so I might hand it over to you.
Yeah, sure, Mayor, thanks.
There might be some changes.
I'm happy to move this notice of motion with a revised couple of words included at suggestion of a fellow councillor. I think it was quite sensible. So we've included the words or lumpy skin disease, LSD in brackets. Otherwise, the notice of motion that I filed is the same.
Is it Councillor McCracken as the seconder? Is it to be opposed? No, Councillor Potter is the mover.
Thanks, Mayor. Look, I think it's pretty self-explanatory. I don't want to talk to it too long, and I'll bring it on the back of a public meeting that was called by farmers held in the Memorial Square. I note that a neighbouring council, Surf Coast, moved a similar motion at a meeting just a couple of weeks ago, and perhaps this could have been done behind closed doors with inviting yourself to write a letter, Mayor, but I'm pleased to have this opportunity to talk about it publicly now because councillors earlier on were briefed with what the Shire are doing at the moment, and I'll point out that this is a federal government and state government responsibility. Council's not the lead agency in any of this, but we have a role in relation to the response and looking after our local community, which relies not just on the farmers but on our livestock processors. So, Mayor, we're advised that there's been Shire's formed a standing committee to focus attention and action on FMD and lumpy skin disease. And this committee is chaired by the GM of Infrastructure and Operations and meets weekly. I know that DJPR set up a local government working group which includes representatives from 8 shires. Our reliance on agriculture was recognised by DJPR, and our CEO is a representative on that council. So this just highlights that the risk to this community faces in relation to an outbreak of foot and mouth disease. CEO, are you happy if I just refer to another points that I know the Shire is doing behind the scenes just to allay concerns of the community? Thank you. Which includes forming a Biosecurity Readiness Action Plan that's being prepared and that will be filed at the Municipal Emergency Management Planning Committee, I think in September, or a draft of that. I can imagine that plan's pretty complicated. We have conducted a review of our stock standing still protocols at the regional sale yards, and there's been a couple of external audits done earlier in the year in relation to that. So I just want to assure everyone that the Shire is working hard in preparation in case there is an outbreak, but just repeating, we're not the lead agency at all. So the thrust of this motion is to encourage the state and federal government to continue to work in relation to securing our biosecurity of the country and especially the Shire.
Councillor McCracken, as the seconder.
Thanks, I'll be quick. Mayor, look, I too was at that public meeting with Councillor Potter and you too, Mayor, who also went there. I think it's worthwhile also acknowledging Peter Delahunty, who at pretty short notice brought it all together as well, and there's probably a couple of hundred farmers there and others associated with the industry very passionate about the issue, and I think it is a testament to Councillor Potter, him being in touch with the community to bring this forward tonight. I think over 60% of dairy in Victoria comes from the southwest, which includes Colac Otway, and the industry nationwide's worth $80 billion over the next 5 years. So, it's so important that we protect this sector. It does so much for the livelihoods of many locals around here. Many of those locals support our footy clubs, our service clubs, our schools, and the list goes on. So, if we didn't support this, I think we wouldn't be listening to our community. So I'm certainly happy to see this go forward, and hopefully we get a good response from both federal and state representatives.
Yeah. Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Costin.
Thank you, Mayor. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to make the rally in Memorial Square, but I fully support this motion. Thank you to Councillor Potter for raising it as a notice of motion, and thank you for adding in the points of lumpy skin disease, and that we also write to the State Minister as well as the Federal Minister. This should be, Councillor Potter said this could be done by officers, but I think it's important that we publicly acknowledge the concerns of our community, and they are real concerns. I'm not sure of the exact figures, but I've read somewhere that there's over 200,000 sheep in Colac Otway Shire and almost 100,000 dairy cattle. I'm not sure if that's correct or not. But it's important that we publicly acknowledge the concerns and that we show that we are advocating on behalf of those farming communities. Thank you.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Hart.
Thanks, Mayor. I'll be supporting this motion. It is a very important issue, and I'd just like to add weight to some of the other comments and commend Councillor Potter for bringing this to Council today. I think it was the appropriate way of handling this.
Okay, councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item's carried 7-0. Okay, councillors, I understand Councillor Costin has a proposed item of urgent business for consideration today. Can I call on Councillor Costin to briefly state the nature and intent of the matter?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for allowing me to raise this. It's to do with the power supply to our coastal communities. There's a change to propose to Power Corps' service delivery approach in Apollo Bay and along the coast. This was reported by the ABC a week ago, and unfortunately that was after the deadline for notices of motion to be submitted. The power reliability along the coast has been a long-standing challenge, and it's appropriate for Council to have a position on the importance of reliable power supply for these communities. I also understand that the change to the Power Corps service is due to be implemented before the end of September, and therefore I think the matter can't wait until our next ordinary Council meeting. So I'm asking councillors to agree to consider a motion that I've proposed as an item of urgent business tonight. Thank you.
Okay, councillors, the first motion is the motion at the top is for this to be considered as an item of urgent business. Do councillors have any questions? Okay, Councillor Costin, you're the mover. Is there a seconder? Councillor Hart, is it to be opposed? Okay. Councillor Costin is the mover. I guess this is just regarding of whether it's regarding the first motion.
Thank you, Mayor. I think it's self-explanatory, and I just explained why it needs to be considered as a matter of urgent business. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hart? No. Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item's carried 7-0. Okay. We've done that. So, okay, Councillor Costin, is it obviously, is this your motion up on the screen?
Thank you, Mayor. That's the motion, and I'll move the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a yes?
Would you be prepared to put something in it? I think it should go further than Power Corps. You should probably include the Minister for Energy as well. Both sides, you know, shadow and current minister. If you want to bring about some publicity.
Thanks, Councillor McCracken. Could that be in point 2.4, where we copy the correspondence to the Essential Services Commission and to the relevant ministers? Shadow ministers, yes.
Thank you. Okay, is there a seconder for Councillor Costin's motion? Councillor Hart? Is it to be opposed? No, Councillor Costin is the mover.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll try and be pretty quick on this. We can get through it quickly. I've highlighted to councillors of this escalating concern, and I've mentioned it was too late to submit as a NOM. For some time, Powercorp have contracted Central Power to provide services along the coast, including to repair faults and coastal power outages. Central Power have employed Apollo Bay-based crews who've provided excellent service to date. The duration of power outages seems to have decreased of late, although I don't have the figures, but no doubt it's due to the use of local electricians who are familiar with the power distribution networks and the common causes of faults. Powercorp have decided not to continue that contract and instead will employ a number of people based in Colac or even in Warrnambool. Now, Colac's an hour away from the coast and Warrnambool's over 2 hours away from the coast. So the coastal communities all along the coast are concerned that fault times will again, the duration of faults will increase and put us back to where we were a number of years ago when we had commonly had outages of 2 or 3 hours. Coastal communities are also concerned about the loss of jobs along the coast, and Powercorp may like to consider that as part of their consideration, as part of their response to any letter we write them. So this is a simple request of councillors to respond to the concerns of our coast community. It's along similar lines to our response on foot and mouth disease to our farming community. And I think it's good that we publicly acknowledge those concerns and show that we're advocating on behalf of all our communities. Thank you.
Councillor Hart.
Thanks, Mayor. I think that having a local crews for these power outages is an important issue, and I thank Councillor Costin for bringing the resolution to Council, and I'll be supporting this.
Thank you. Does any other councillor wish to speak? No, councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item's carried 7-0. Thank you, councillors. That concludes this council meeting of the Colac Otway Shire. I declare this meeting closed.
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.